Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Folks, things are happening so fast, I can't keep up with them. Do you realize it was just 5 minutes ago I put show prep to bed and got ready to go. And in the last 10 minutes, there have been 7 different things that take precedence over everything I've spent the last 8 hours doing.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday!
Meaning I've got my stacks here, and in the last 10 minutes, here comes 7 things that take precedence over all those other things. And it's all fascinating, it's all entertaining, it's all good, it's all important. I mean, it's getting even harder to categorize this stuff. You know, what do you put at the top of the stack? I mean, of these 7 things that came in, 3 of them deserve number 1 status, but you can't do all 3 at the same time. So this is where you just have to trust me, as I know you do. And it's Open Line Friday, which means that when we go to the phones, the people we put on the air, the callers, have a little bit more leeway in talking about what they want, because it doesn't have to be about all of this. It doesn't have to be politics, it doesn't have to be culture, it can be Super Bowl, it can be anything. Whatever interests you, even if I don't care about it. That's what doesn't happen Monday through Thursday. If you call about something I don't care about, that's it. We tell you to call back on Friday. Again, 800-282-2882, email address lrushbo@eibnet.us. This has got to be a joke, except that it's not. Right here it is, thehill.com. GOP senator, we don't have enough power to repeal Obamacare. No. Whatever. We gave you the House. You said you needed the Senate. We gave you the Senate. You said we don't have the White House. We need the White House. Now you've got it all. You got the House, the Senate, the White House. Pretty soon going to have the Supreme Court. Not enough power to repeal Obamacare. And I've had people emailing me, folks. I should tell you this. Trump voters, and they're watching all this stuff go on out there with Australia and with Mexico and the sanctions on Iran. And I'm telling you, listen, people that are sending me notes, it's not a sizable number, but I think it represents a big number. And they're saying, I don't care about this stuff right now. Where is the Obamacare repeal? Where are the tax cuts? Where is the domestic agenda of Obama being turned upside down and inside out? And some people are starting to get a little impatient. That's why I asked Vice President Pence about this when he was here on, what day was he? Was he Wednesday or Thursday? This is Friday. Was Pence here? Yes, it wasn't yesterday. He assured us on the infrastructure spending, he assured us that the Obamacare repeal was on track. This senator is Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. He said he is warning, and again, it's thehill.com. I don't know what's fake news anymore. This is another thing that it is incumbent upon me to include in practically everything we report today. It could have elements of fake news in it. It is stunning how much fake news there is and how much it is expanding. But this is what thehill.com is saying. Senator Ron Johnson warning the GOP can only do so much to repeal Obamacare, downplaying lawmakers' ability to completely dismantle the law. He said, we only have so much power to repeal certain elements of Obamacare through reconciliation. That's 51 votes. We can repeal the taxes. We can repeal the subsidies. Said this on CNN this morning. He said, so many of the market reforms, I would call them the market distortions that have caused premiums to skyrocket and out-of-pocket maximums and deductibles to skyrocket, those are probably going to need 60 votes. And we don't have 60 votes. We only have 52 votes. And it doesn't sound like the Democrats are really willing to bear the responsibility of the mess they created. So He's saying essentially that with 51 votes through reconciliation, which is how Obamacare was passed anyway. It was passed through budget reconciliation. Look, I'm not going to take the time to explain that right now. Suffice it to say that going the reconciliation route obviates the need for 60 votes. Because they didn't have 60. Obama didn't have 60 votes for this either because he didn't have a single Republican vote. They had to do trick after trick after trick to get the Democrats unified. They had to lie to Bart Stupak. Remember that about the bill being pro-life or not? It was just a bunch of garbage in there. But anyway, Ron Johnson's saying that through reconciliation, they can repeal the taxes and the subsidies. But when it comes to the premiums and when it comes to the deductibles, well, I don't know what we're going to be able to do about it because we're going to need 60 votes and the Democrats aren't going to be there to help us. So this reads like a Saturday Night Live script to me. Republicans have won everything there is to win, and they still are saying there's not enough power. Now we need 60 votes. And this is going to be coupled with some people's suspicion that they don't really want to do this. That some Republicans really don't want to repeal Obamacare. They really only want to replace. Have you heard the new terminology now? By the way, they're throwing out repeal and replace with repeal and repair. And so there's a growing sentiment out there that some Republicans, don't know how many, don't even want to tackle it. It's too hard. It's fraught with too many unknowns that could backfire, electorally or politically. Report today from Stanford University and New York University that says fake news did not affect the U.S. election, which means that all those mainstream media stories about how fake news affected the election were themselves fake news. Fake news did not affect the election. The fake news wasn't believed by enough people. The fake news didn't reach enough people. It's an exhaustive, extensive study of fake news. And so it has revealed that even the stories claiming fake news affected the outcome were themselves fake news. The study says that the fake news that helped Trump outnumbered the fake news that helped Hillary, which must mean the study didn't count the endless mainstream media articles and polls that claimed Hillary was a shoo-in. You talk about fake news. Those polls, I think one of the reasons the left is as discombobulated as it is the drive-bys. I think they believed everything the drive-bys told them. I think they believed everything that Nate Silver told them. I think they believed every poll that showed Hillary was going to win in a landslide or by 5 points or by... They believed it. And then they believed the exit polls. And then the real truth came in, and they weren't prepared for it in any way. I mean, they never even held out the possibility that Trump could win. It wasn't even a distant possibility in their vision. They just bought it all hook, line, and sinker. The House has voted to overturn an Obama administration drilling rule. The House today passed a resolution to reverse a pollution rule for oil and natural gas drillers that was put in place by the Obama administration, 221 to 191, to approve a Congressional Review Act resolution against the Bureau of Land Management's methane venting and flaring rule. Now, if it's approved by the Senate and signed by Trump, the rule would come off the books for good and would once again open up the land to all kinds of drilling that Obama shut down. That will probably happen. The Labor Secretary, former Labor Secretary, Robert B. Reich, claims that the protesters in Berkeley were actually hired by Breitbart. That it was a Breitbart false flag. It weren't really leftists that were doing it. Let's go to the audio sound bites. Last night on CNN Tonight, Don Lemon speaking with the former Secretary of Labor for Clinton, said the violence we saw at Berkeley, it plays right into the hands of the right-wing white supremacists, you know, the people at Breitbart. What do you think about that, Mr. Secretary?
It absolutely does, Don. And I'd want to be very, very clear. I was there for part of last night, and I know what I saw. And those people were not Berkeley students. Those were outsiders, agitators. I've never seen them before. There's rumors that they actually were right-wingers. They were part of a kind of a group that were organized and ready to create the kind of tumult and danger you saw that forced the police to cancel the event. So Donald Trump, when he says Berkeley, doesn't respect free speech rights, that's a complete distortion of the truth.
Do you hear how enthusiastic he is? Do you know any right-wingers capable of this kind of behavior? I mean, go to Ferguson, go to Baltimore, go to San Bernardino, go to Watts, to any protest, any violence. Go to Oakland anytime you want. Anytime there is violent protests, it's always left-wingers, bought and paid for by the Hillary campaign, the Democrat Party, or George Soros. And never once have the Democrats ever elected, because they're proud of them. They're proud of these anarchists. They're proud of the people that blow up bank buildings. They're proud of the people that start fires. They never blame them. They never try to pass it off as fake protesters hired by Republicans until now. Why now? Why would it be? Why don't they embrace these people? Why isn't former Labor Secretary Reich and the rest of the left embracing these people and giving them a bunch of attaboys? Why aren't they encouraging them? You know this is the kind of instability and chaos that they want because they know it's going to be blamed on Trump. They know that all of this, the drive-bys and everybody in education is going to point fingers at Trump. Hell, Peggy Noonan's done it. I've got it. That's one of the things that's been superseded by other stuff in the news. Oh, and they've discovered a new unemployment rate. Wait till you hear this. They've discovered the U6 unemployment rate at CNBC. This is just, it's too juicy. And here's now the former Clinton Labor Secretary. They don't want anybody to think that these protesters in Berkeley that blew that place up were Democrats. They don't want them against leftist students. Why do they not want to embrace them, encourage them, and claim credit? What is there to gain by blaming this on Breitbart? Don Lemon, now thoroughly intrigued, said, "You think this is a strategy by Milo Yiannopoulos or right-wingers? That they put this on in an effort to show that there's no free speech on a college campus like Berkeley? The right-wingers did this?"
I wouldn't bet against it, Don. I saw these people. They all looked almost paramilitary. They were not from the campus. I've heard, again, I don't want to say factually, but I've heard that there was some relationship there between these people and the right wing, and the right wing movement that is affiliated with Breitbart News.
These people are losing their minds. I was there. They were all dressed in black. I have not seen this before. It's called, there's a name for these people. They're Black Rock or something, and they are well-known leftists associated with George Soros. They come in all black, and they hide their faces. Many of them are not students. That's the point. They are bought and paid for. But here is Reich. I was there. I saw this. These were right-wingers. Sure as I'm sitting here with you. I like he was checking student IDs or whatever. But no, they weren't students. That's the point. Here's something else about this, if I can try to regain my... I don't know. I just hear this little guy get so juiced, folks. He gets so excited talking about this conspiracy. I wouldn't bet against it, Don. I would. I heard that the president of the university, I'm still tracking this down, actually had campus cops and Berkeley cops stand down while this happened. that there was in certain quarters a desire for this to happen. Okay, folks, there's a lot I want to touch on today. Peggy Noonan has a column. She's wringing her hands. She's very, very upset all of a sudden. She was all excited for Trump. She was all excited about what it meant. Well, I mean, tempered excitement, but she was clearly intrigued. Now, all of a sudden, she's very, very, very concerned, very, very, very worried because it's really unstable. As they in Washington gaze out across the landscape, they don't find any stability. And somehow this is Trump's fault? I want to get into this in much greater detail. We have the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday. The Atlanta Falcons and the Patriots. I saw Lady Gaga did a press conference promoting the upcoming halftime show. You know what Lady Gaga said? Lady Gaga said that she doesn't want the halftime show to be a step down in intensity. She said, you got these guys out there, meaning the players, and they're just running collisions on each other every play. I mean, they're out there, they're trying to kill each other, and I don't want the halftime show to be any different. Okay. And then she went on to say that it was definitely going to be a statement. Well, we can pretty much assume what that statement's going to be, and I, for one, don't care to see it. I don't care to have to come in here and talk about it on Monday. I'm just not interested. It's too predictable. And I doubt that she'll have anything to say that would intrigue me or inspire me or do anything other than be totally predictable. But then there's the game analysis. And there's two ways to analyze this game. The X's and O's and on-field strategy, and then the intangibles. And then determining which of the two will have a greater impact on the outcome of the game. The X's and O's, the strategery, or the intangibles. I'm voting for the intangibles. We'll explain all this and a heck of a lot more. Take a break, catch my breath, and get reorganized. Be right back. Hey, look, this Ron Johnson story, Senator Johnson, Wisconsin, and the inability to do anything about the premiums and the deductibles and the mandates and all that in Obamacare. I'll answer some more questions for you on this in the next segment. That he's basically saying that we don't have 60 votes, and the Senate parliamentarian is telling us that we can't use reconciliation on the premium side of things. And you're telling me that the Republican majority is going to sit there and let an unelected Senate parliamentarian rule over them? And of course they're going to, because they don't really want to replace Obamacare, folks. And we've known this from the get-go. From the moment this was passed, and with all of those fake resolution votes on repealing Obamacare, what did we say when this first passed? The danger of it passing in the first place is that it becomes an entitlement. And we can't think of us. Well, there's one entitlement that has been removed after it was implemented. That was the Dan Rostenkowski Medicare, or whatever it was. The seasoned citizens didn't want any part of it, so it was repealed. But it becomes an entitlement, and the Republicans just don't have the stomach for taking away what they think is a government giveaway and a freebie and leaving people uninsured. But this is absurd that they've won everything there is to win out there and still don't have the power because of the Senate parliamentarian. But that's their story, and they're going to stick with it. So hang on. I have lots more coming up. More than I'm overwhelmed, but I'm going to try to get it all in. Greetings and welcome back. It's great to have you. Rush Limbaugh on Open Line Friday. Look, I know Mike Pence was here on Wednesday. He did the first radio interview after the Supreme Court nominee was named, Neil Gorsuch, who, by the way, there's another bit of fake news. I don't know if you saw this or not, but all day yesterday, the drive-bys were breathlessly reporting that Gorsuch had headed up in prep school a pro-fascist club. Had you heard that? It turns out to be totally made up. It was totally fake. What happened was that it was in the I think one of the yearbooks some sophomore wrote descriptions of people, and Gorsuch was, by all measure, the most conservative guy in his prep school, and they were jamming him by writing that he was heading up the fascist club. You know, the drive-bys get this stuff, and they don't mention any context whatsoever. And they do this stuff on purpose. They lie and make this stuff up on purpose, knowing that it's going to be very, very difficult to catch up and get the truth applied to these things. I don't know how much damage, if any, was done by this, but because Gorsuch is sitting here now, he's going to get confirmed. But, I mean, who would believe it in the first place? And get this. I'm minding my own business last night, and I get a heads up that the cybercast, the Newsbusters, our old buddy Brent Bozell and the gang, have come across a New York Times story. You won't believe this. As many of you know, before I started the EIB network, I had a local talk show in Sacramento, California, my adopted hometown, on a 50,000-watt blowtorch radio station, KFBK. The New York Times had a story this week blaming me and that show in Sacramento for the anti-immigrant attitude that existed in California during the 1980s, when guys like Pete Wilson were being elected governor. That's back in the days when the Republicans ran the state of California. Well, at least they were having governors elected. Willie Brown ran the state, but nevertheless, I mean, how in the world, it was some woman named Emily Badger, and I looked her up. She couldn't have been 2 years old when I was doing that show, if she was even born. So how in the world do you end up? Somebody out there probably had to throw my name around, one of the sources she talked to, but that's, you know what it is? I'm their Darth Vader. I am their Bond villain. When they need a villain, when they need a face to plug into a story designed to scare and mobilize the left, they just do me whenever it fits. And so they're trying to look at the changing attitudes about immigration in California. And when did it stop being Republican racist? And it happened when I left. Yeah, my presence. It was a local show in Sacramento. It was 50,000 watts, but it was way up there at 15-something hundred on a dial. I mean, it didn't get much past Merced. Tony Coelho could listen to it. That's about it. Just the fringes of the Bay Area. Yet they're blaming me for the entire anti-immigrant attitude that existed in California in the 80s. But don't misunderstand. I'll gladly take it. I will wear the badge proudly. When these people need a villain, they automatically gravitate to me. Now, back to this Obamacare business, because, folks, look, we touched on this stuff in detail yesterday, Mexico and Australia. And if you were here yesterday, you got pretty much all the detail about that. You've now probably been exposed to a whole bunch of fake news about it, distortions and misreporting, and Trump has had his morning tweets, which we'll get to. And we talked yesterday about the sanctions on Iran and getting tough there over there, cheating on the nuke deal. You know, all of that's what it is. And Trump is indeed focusing on elements of his campaign that he seriously promised: saving jobs, bringing jobs back, working out different versions of trade deals. And there's no question that he's moving fast. He's moving faster than any president in my lifetime. He's moving faster than the media can keep up with. He's moving faster than anybody can keep up with, at least in terms of bringing the issues up and making it look like action's taking place on them. I mean, it's a breakneck pace. But over there on Capitol Hill, there's an entire other part of the Trump agenda which is just languishing. And that part of the Trump agenda is repealing Obamacare, which he promised as strongly and stringently as he did to fix NAFTA and bring jobs back. There is tax cuts and the reform of the tax code. You know, I mentioned at the top of the program, I'm hearing from people that were dyed-in-the-wool, eager beaver Trump supporters who are worried that he's not gotten there yet, and were hoping that this was going to be first. And this Obamacare repeal, you know, that's signature. If that doesn't happen, Trump may not be enough to save the Republicans. If this doesn't happen, after all of this, after all of these promises, after all of these assurances, after all of the assurances that the plan's in place, We've been told a replacement plan is in place. We've doubted it from the get-go. You go back to the transcripts of this program, and I'm sure you could find a number of occasions where I've warned everybody that if left to their own devices, the Republicans would prefer not to touch this because it's an entitlement. They're from the Washington establishment. Their mindset is still of the old Washington establishment. Trump is the only thing new, and to them, he's responsible for all of the upset and the instability, and that's what they want to normalize. When they say they want to normalize things, it means they want to neuter Trump. They want to cut Trump down to size. They want to slow Trump down, which is another subject I'm going to be getting into in some detail this afternoon. So hang in there and be tough. This morning, for those of you in the Pacific and Western time zones, the bottom line is, I've always had my concerns that lip service was what we were getting on Obamacare because A, it involves two things. It's an entitlement, and those just don't get repealed. And the second thing is it's health care, and it's insurance. And this is one of those instances where image trumps reality. And if the image is, if the perception is that a lot of people have insurance who didn't, and then the Republicans come along and repeal it and replace it, then they fear they're going to be open to allegations that they are taking people's health insurance away from them and that they are taking people's health care away from them. And they don't want to go there. They don't think they have a chance in explaining their side of the deal to the media and having it reported fairly and honestly to people. And they're right about that. But we have the election returns, and we know what people who showed up in large numbers to vote for the Republicans and for Trump, we know why. Reforming, repealing, replacing, getting rid of Obamacare is right up at the top. Immigration's right up at the top. Closing the border, securing the border, keeping bad elements out of the country, reclaiming this country from the leftist fringe that was trying to transform it. Rebuilding the American economy and creating American jobs. All of these things. And Obamacare and tax code reform is right at the top of all these lists. Now, I want to go to the audio sound bites because we have Senator Johnson, who was on CNN's New Day today talking about this. He talked to Chris Cuomo. And he said, look, Obamacare's always had problems. And I'm listening to you guys, and I don't hear you say repeal and replace. I'm hearing you say repeal and repair. Is that what it's come down to now?
When I talk about repair, I'm talking about repairing all the damage done by Obamacare. Obamacare has created this enormous mess, this big mess, and I'm trying to fix that big mess. I don't think Obamacare is fixable, quite honestly. And the other reality is, we only have so much power to repeal just certain elements of Obamacare through reconciliation with 51 votes. The taxes, the subsidies, but so many of the market reforms, I would call them the market distortions that have caused premiums to skyrocket and out-of-pocket maximums and deductibles to skyrocket. Those, we're probably going to need 60 votes, and it doesn't sound like the Democrats are really willing to bear the responsibility of the mess they created.
Okay, so I'll now defer to the USA Today piece on this. What he's basically saying is when he says we don't have the power, translated means we don't have 60 votes. We can only do so much of this with 51 votes. With 51 votes, he said we will be able to deal with some of the tax cuts, and we'll be able to deal with some of the other. But when it comes to the insurance parts of this, when it comes to the premiums, when it comes to minimums and maximums, we're not going to have a chance to touch those because those need 60 votes. Okay, well, that then opens a question, why do they need 60 votes? Who in the world is saying they need 60 votes? And Johnson and some of the Republicans said, well, we can only do so much of this with budget reconciliation. That would be the tax side. We can't do all of it with budget reconciliation. Why can't we do it all with budget? They passed the whole thing with budget reconciliation. Why can't we do the repeal and replace? Because the Senate parliamentarian says so, don't you know? The Senate parliamentarian, for those of you in Rio Linda, is the guy in charge of the rules and how the Senate operates. He's the expert in it. And on occasion, there's deference to the guy. But here's the timeline. This is what we were told. Republicans, before certain elections, said we need the House if we're going to repeal Obamacare. So we gave them the House. But then nothing happened. They said, that's right, we need the Senate. We can't do anything because Obama's still in the Oval. We can't do anything. We need the Senate. We gave them the Senate in the 2014 midterms. And then they said, well, really great. We appreciate it. We need the White House. I mean, we need all three. We need White House, House, and Senate to be able to do this. So we elected Trump. And Trump was running also on repeal and replace Obamacare. So everything that our dear Republicans said they needed, they got. And so now, after voters have delivered, it has now come down to an unelected Senate parliamentarian standing in their way. We are to believe that a majority of elected senators cannot overrule the parliamentarian. That's right. Mr. Limbaugh, our hands are tied. That's right. That's right. I've been here a long time, and I looked at it, Limbaugh. And yeah, I know you'd like us to tell a guy to say, stuff it. We can't. So they're saying that they cannot repeal the regulations on insurance companies by reconciliation. Only the mandates and the taxes. However, my friends, the regulations on the insurance companies, which is what drives the costs up and makes the mandates and taxes necessary, is obviously inextricably linked to the mandates and taxes. You can't have the mandates and taxes going up and down without the action taken on the insurance companies, on the premiums and the maximums. But then again, who cares what the parliamentarian thinks? This is just common sense. Saying they can't repeal the regulations on insurance companies by reconciliation, even though the whole thing was passed that way. They can only do the mandates and taxes. The mandate to buy insurance and the tax. They can roll those back. They can get rid of those. But the regulations on the insurance companies, which is where the premiums skyrocketing occurs and the minimums and the deductibles and all that. No, we can't. We need 60 votes for that. Parliamentarian says so. So it looks like, to us, outside looking in, that they're just looking for reasons not to do it. And we know why. The minute this thing was implemented, we knew there was going to be overwhelming fear of actually repealing it, because it's taking away. That's Santa Claus going back down the chimney on December 27th and taking everything back to the North Pole in their minds. And they don't want to be that Santa Claus. Open Line Friday. Always like to get started on the phones in the first hour of the program. We'll go to Christina in Fresno. Great to have you on the EIB network. Hello.
Great. Hello. I just wanted to point out the hypocrisy of our elected. Whenever there's a new tax or mandate like Obamacare, that very next tax return, the IRS is there ready to enact that penalty. But you've got long-standing immigration law, and all of a sudden, not so fast, you can't deport the families. It's hypocrisy.
Yeah, but you're right on the Obamacare thing. I want to be historically complete here. I understand exactly what you're saying. We've got a set of laws on immigration, and they will not, up to now, enforce them. They have not been enforcing them left and right. But when it comes to a tax, when it comes to an audit, when it comes to a mandate that you buy something, they're right in there monitoring everything you do, making sure you pay everything you owe instantly. On Obamacare, the thing that you have to remember on this is it's a minor point in a big scheme, but the Republicans never voted for it. And it's important to remember this. And that's why the Democrats had to use all kinds of tricks to get this passed, including budget resolution. They made Obamacare part of the budget. It was never actually, the whole thing was never actually voted on. There were never any hearings on Obamacare. They never brought any experts to testify what would happen if this part of the bill is implemented. There were no hearings whatsoever. This thing was ramrodded down our throats, most often under cover of darkness, and it was just put in that year's budget. That's what reconciliation is for the most part. It's a more convoluted thing. And budget reconciliation, because of the debt limit and because of the mandates that the U.S. pay its bills, there are never 60 votes demanded for a budget, only 51. Okay? Now the Republicans are saying that they can only repeal certain parts of this through budget reconciliation, where they don't need 60 votes. And they're then saying the parliamentarian, who's probably a lifelong Obama federal employee, heck, I don't know who the parliamentarian is, but they're saying that for anything related to the insurance companies, including the mandates, the premiums, the minimums, the deductibles, we have to do 60 votes. The parliamentarian saying we can't do that through the budget. And we don't have 60 votes. We don't have the power. That's what they're saying. But there isn't any hypocrisy here in the sense that they never voted for it. I mean, it's a bunch of tax increases. It's a bunch of big government. The Republicans, there's not a single Republican that voted for this. And I want to make sure that's squared in your comment about hypocrisy. I don't want them lumped in on. Upcoming, Peggy Noonan's column headline, in Trump's Washington, nothing feels stable. It's not Trump's Washington. It's still Obama's Washington. That's the point. The drive-bys have discovered the U6 unemployment number now, all of a sudden since Obama's gone. That and much more straight ahead. And greetings to you, music lovers, thrill seekers, conversationalists all across the fruited plain. Rush Limbaugh here at the EIB Network on Friday.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
Great to have you with us. The telephone number is 800-282-2882 and the email address, lrushbo@eibnet.com. EIBnet.us. Sorry, I caught myself. It's a brand new domain. EIBnet.us. Do you see where Vanity Fair and the New Yorker have pulled out of the White House Correspondents' Dinner? Yeah, they're still. Oh, are they still going to have it? Ha! Yeah, bet they're going to have it. They can't wait to have it. If I were Trump, I wouldn't go. I don't know if they're going to have, by the time this thing, it's usually in late April or early May, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and with Vanity Fair pulling out, that's a big party pulling out. Forget the dinner. I mean, that's a giant pre- and post-party that isn't going to, well, I don't know. They might, I guess if they're pulling out, they're pulling out. They're not going to do the parties either. New Yorker, big whoop. But if others come along and pull, no concern of mine. Ladies and gentlemen, remember during the Obama years when the economy was foundering and there wasn't any economic growth, and we were being told that, well, this is the new norm. We really never deserved our previous superpower status because it was achieved in an immoral and unjust way. We must learn to adjust to life like most in the world live life. And our economy for the longest time will be in a state of decline. And the objective here is to manage that decline. I mean, these were not word-for-word utterances from the Obama administration, but this was the point. And we kept losing jobs. And then Obamacare came along, and not only were we losing more jobs, then the job classifications were changing. More and more people began more businesses, small and large, firing people and replacing them with part-timers working less than 30 hours a week, because under the Obamacare rules, you didn't have to provide anybody health insurance if they only worked 29 hours a week. So it was a bad situation. There were new jobs that were not being created. The labor force participation, I remember talking about this constantly, the number of able-bodied Americans that were not working was in the 93 to 94 million range. And there was no good economic news. And the Obama administration continued to monkey around with the unemployment rate. And they would claim that the unemployment rate was declining, even though we were only creating 125,000 new jobs a month or 77,000 new jobs. And the reason for that is that after you stopped looking for work and were still unemployed, you were no longer counted as unemployed in the category of unemployment that they always reported. And that was called the U3, the letter U-3. The Labor Department has 6 different categories to express unemployment, and the U3 is what is always reported. The U6 number includes the people who are out of work and have been out of work so long they're no longer looking. The U3 number is designed to only measure employment among people who are unemployed but want to work and those who are working. The U6 number is always going to be a much higher percentage because it includes the people who've been out of work so long they've exhausted their unemployment benefits. They still haven't found work, and they've given up looking, meaning they're not showing up to register for benefits. They're not following any requirements to report where they've looked for jobs. They've just fallen off the charts, and they are part of that 94 million not working. And during those years, we here at the EIB network always reported the U6 number because the U6 number was a more accurate portrayal of the employment and unemployment situation in the country. The drive-by media would never even acknowledge the U6 number. The drive-by media stuck with the U3 number because it was that number that allowed them to report the unemployment rate, which is utterly meaningless, was falling. I think it ended up at around 4.9%. The last number in the last quarter or two of the Obama presidency. It was an absolute joke. How can you have an unemployment rate of 4.9% when 94 million Americans are not working? Anyway, lo and behold, now the January employment numbers have been released. And all of a sudden, guess who has discovered the U6 unemployment number? Why, no less than the drive-by media and CNBC. Unemployment rose slightly in January, but a more realistic rate is even higher. So here is the acknowledgement that during the entire 8 years of Obama, they knew that there was a more realistic portrayal of the employment and unemployment situation in America, and they ignored it. Now that Trump is in office, not only are they going to report it, they're going to acknowledge that it is more realistic. The national unemployment rate rose slightly to 4.8% in January, Labor Department announced. However, says CNBC, relying on that one headline number as an indicator of the economy overall ignores important information just below the surface. Really? Isn't it amazing how this happens? You get a Democrat out of office and a Republican in office, and all of a sudden the drive-bys note what they claim, and it's true, is a more realistic number. But we've been with Trump here in office for 1 month, and you might be able to make a case that some of the uptick in economic activity beginning in November and December, you can also partially credit to Trump just because of the attitudinal improvement that had no doubt come over a majority of the country based on votes, and Trump's promises and his transition making it very clear that he was going to keep all of these promises. But nevertheless, Trump was not even in office for 10 days of January, and they're already associating the U6 unemployment number to him and his policies. Here's what CNB says. Each month on Jobs Friday, the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out a treasure trove of economic data, each of which provides its own perspective on the labor market and the employment situation. Economists look past the official unemployment rate, also known as the U3, to other metrics that give their own view of jobs in the country. And one of those figures is called the U6 rate. We need to do a LexisNexis survey and find out how many drive-by media outlets ever talked about U6 from 2009 through 2016. And I'll bet you we can put it on one hand. One of those figures is called the U6 rate, which has a broader definition of unemployment than the U3. In January, that number ticked up from 9.2% to 9.4%. The official unemployment rate is defined as total unemployed, meaning the unemployed, the underemployed, the discouraged, the hopeless, the having given up. But all of a sudden, after Trump's in office for 10 days of the reporting month, all of a sudden, the U6 is going to be reported. It's a travesty. It is another glaring example of journalistic malpractice, and it isn't just CNBC. They're all going to do it. Because the purpose here is to make Trump's policies look ineffective, and if they can, to make Trump's policies look like failures. Which takes me to Peggy Noonan's piece, and I'm not going to get into the piece. I want to bounce off the headline here. She has her Friday Wall Street Journal column, and the headline, "In Trump's Washington, Nothing Feels Stable." Well, it isn't Trump's Washington yet, by any measure. The establishment is still in charge of this town, folks. It's one of the things that's wrong with it. This is still, Washington, D.C. is still Obama's town. It's still Obama's Washington. And that's the problem that has to be fixed. And it's not going to be pretty. Obama's Washington is openly insubordinate. Obama's Washington is leaking like a sieve. Obama's Washington is passive-aggressive. Obama's Washington is unhinged because Washington was never intended to belong to a political party, but it does now. It belongs to the Democrats, and they are fit to be tied. Whose fault is it that nothing feels stable? What is stability? But let's define stability. What does Peggy Noonan actually mean by stability? When she says, in Trump's Washington, nothing seems stable. What stable? Anybody want to take a stab? What stable means? Snerdley said the usual process is with the usual. No, stability in Washington means the liberals are in clear control. The liberals are in charge. It means liberalism and the Democrat Party are operating it and owning it, running it. That's what stability means in Washington. Whenever the liberals are defeated at the ballot box, whenever the Republicans hold positions of power, that's when it automatically becomes unstable in Washington. The only time Washington is stable is when there's a Democrat in the White House. And when that doesn't happen, then here come the stories about how everything's unstable. We're feeling nervous. We don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next and maybe even 1 hour to the next. It's so unsettling. It's so unsettling. And I just want things to be stable again. Whose fault is it that nothing is stable? Who is it that's standing in the way of everything that wants to be done? Who is it? It's the Democrat Party that's creating the instability. It's the American left creating the instability. It's not Trump supporters blowing up college campuses. It's not Trump supporters openly violating executive orders and trying to undermine the sitting president. It's not Trump's people doing this. But I keep saying this is what it looks like. Washington, Hollywood, academia have been under the control of Washington and under the control of Democrats and leftists for generations. And any serious effort to take it back, to wrest control, is going to cause circumstances and situations exactly like we're in. And here's the thing. You can't quit 25% of the way through it, halfway through it. Once a serious, concerted effort is made to reassert control over our nation and the government, of course they're going to act like stuck pigs. Of course they're going to protest march and threaten damage and threaten violence and threaten assassination. That's who they are. Of course they're going to destroy private property. Of course they're going to politicize everything. Of course the career Democrats in the bureaucracy are going to try to undermine the new Republican president every day, multiple times a day. That's when it is most important to hang in, to stick with it, and see it through. This is no time for anybody to go wobbly, especially since it's all been predictable. I understand the peer pressure and the public pressure brought to bear of what looks to be a media that represents a majority. All it takes is a single story claiming that Trump is the first president to fall below 50% approval in his first month in the history of the country. Oh no, they're starting to hate Trump already. All of this stuff is mind control. It's all designed, as it always has been, to depress you, to dispirit you, to convince you that what you believe is wrong and in the minority, to convince you that what happened in November really didn't happen, that it was a quirk, that it was the Russians, that it was cheating, that it was not real. Anything they can do to upset the massive support base that Trump has, and it's an ongoing effort, and it's taking many different shapes and sizes in every day. And this headline on Peggy Noonan's column is just the latest example. In Trump's Washington, nothing seems stable. Is Berkeley stable? Is Berkeley, where they're blowing up things and throwing bricks and and potentially injuring people, is that stability? Was the Women's March on Washington after Trump's inauguration, is that what is meant by stability? Where Madonna's up there making a fool of herself, talking about wanting to blow up the White House, and Ashley Judge making an even bigger fool of herself. I'm a nasty woman. And then Meryl Streep talking about the power of her vagina, whatever. That's stability? As I haven't read Peggy's column, but the instability is not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is executing and implementing the mandate that he achieved by winning the election. If there's any instability, then we're seeing it on the part of the left. The entire Democrat agenda, if you ask me, is to promote instability. And the definition of stability is when the Democrats are controlling things. It is purposefully destabilizing. And now, my friends, a brief obscene profit time out here in the EIB network. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Open Line Friday, Rush Limbaugh. I think what's happening out there, I think what Peggy Noonan's piece, I haven't read the piece. I'm just bouncing off the headline. The headline's all I needed. This business in Trump's Washington, nothing feels stable. I think Trump is responsible for one part of it. He's just racing through things. I don't think they can keep up. Did you hear the South Park guys, the guys who do the TV show South Park? They've said, we are stopping involving Trump on our show. We can't keep up because it takes so long to do animations. By the time we get something prepared, Trump's long gone from it. And the drive-bys can't keep up. They prepare these hit pieces ready to go, and Trump's off to something else. And they're off balance, and that equals unstable. I hope Trump doesn't fall prey to any of this. No indication yet that he is inclined to, but I hope he's not in this to be loved, because that is never going to happen. You want to see the cover of the latest German magazine, Der Spiegel? It's an animation, it's a cartoon. Trump having chopped off the head of the Statue of Liberty, which is bleeding. He got a knife in his left hand. He's holding the head of the Statue of Liberty in his right hand, and it's bleeding. He's decapitated it. It's just sick. Just sick stuff. Here's John in Vero Beach, Florida, right up the road here. Great to have you, John. What's happening? What's up? What's going on?
Russ, what an honor and privilege to be speaking with you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Great to have you on the program. What's happening? What's up?
Yesterday, my wife and I were talking about the news yesterday at the prayer meeting when Donald Trump, and I'm sure it was all tongue in cheek, but made reference about the Apprentice ratings dropping, and asked for prayer for Arnold Schwarzenegger. But, as media savvy as President Trump is, I'm wondering, since President Trump and Mark Burnett are friends, is this might be just a way of saying, hey, Mark, here's a little bit of a ratings boost for you. And, again, it's one of those things that President Trump is very savvy with the media. And I just would like to get your thought on that, sir.
Let me ask you a question. Are you a religious person? And if so, did that comment at the prayer breakfast offend you as being, this is not the time to start making jokes about people here. This is not the time to start throwing the word hell around. This is not the time to start asking people to pray for Arnold Schwartz. Did it bother you or not?
Sir, I tell you what, I've been in the Air Force for over 30 years. I'm freshly retired, and my faith is as strong as ever. And there are times for levity, and I'm telling you what, President Trump, he can use it whenever he wants.
Okay,
and,
so it's
great.
It didn't bother you. Okay, I'm down to 5 seconds. I'm down to 5 seconds, so I'm going to have to answer your question when we come back. And I'll remember it, because I have a good memory. Okay, to answer the previous caller's question, do I think that Trump at the prayer breakfast goosing Schwarzenegger was designed to get the ratings of The Apprentice up? Maybe. After all, the creator and Trump's partner of the show, Mark Burnett, was there. Mark Burnett married to Roma Downey. Mark Burnett introduced him. Trump, I'm sure, does not want anything bad to happen to Burnett. I'm sure he loves ragging on Schwarzenegger, his replacement. I think Trump it could well have been an effort to promote the show. Now that, hey, I want to be honest with you about media performers' egos. It's totally understandable that Trump would be happy that his replacement doesn't do as well as he does. Folks, that's entirely normal. It's in this business, it's perfectly normal. You're always hoping that the people you compete against don't do well. That's where journalists are phony. They try to say, oh, we don't care about our ratings. We're interested in the news. It's BS. Otherwise, they wouldn't be moving from network to network and job to job. And once it's been demonstrated that The Apprentice lost some audience when Trump left, okay, mission accomplished. And then there's an added bonus. If he can get the ratings back up by having a little phony feud with Schwarzenegger, then that's even more to his point. Now, whether that was going on, I don't know. I have no idea. What I can tell you, it wasn't an attempt to disrespect anything. It wasn't an attempt to insult the prayer breakfast. It was just Trump being Trump. And I'm convinced at its most innocent it was a joke. And it could well have been an effort to get people to watch the program, get them interested in it. I don't know. But it's not the kind of thing to lose sleep over. It's not the, oh, my God, this is so horrible. Something like this happening. And, oh, my God, I can't believe this happened at the prayer. Oh, no. I mean, has it not been demonstrated? Did not the evangelical movement vote en masse for Trump? You go back to the campaign. Remember, it was Ted Cruz. Everybody thought Ted Cruz had the evangelical Christian vote all tied up. Owned them. And yet, Trump won practically all of them. And the professional political consultants to this day can't figure it out. And you know why they can't figure it out? Because it is they who have a caricatured version of evangelical people. The Democrats and the left political consultants think that evangelical people are Mennonites. They are the Amish. And they're walking around and driving around in little black wagons being pulled by horses. And they live according to an 1800s code. I mean, their opinion of evangelicals, you would not believe what they really think of evangelicals. Backwards, behind the times, they spend every waking moment in prayer, asking God for everything. The last thing, as far as the leftists, evangelicals are in no way, shape, manner, form normal. They're not natural. They are old-fashioned, and they're stuffed shirts, and they're mean-spirited, and they're discriminatory, and they're bigots. They hate them. They're all pro-life. They all have shotguns in the back of those little black wagons being pulled along by the horses. The Pennsylvania Amish and the Dutch and the Mennonites, they despise them. And here comes Trump. Trump, after the Access video, Trump wins a majority of the... It doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense. And still to this day, so Trump goes to the prayer breakfast and says what he says. Remember when he didn't say 2 Corinthians, he said 2 Corinthians. Oh, my God, it's just proven that he's not religious. He doesn't even understand it's 2 Corinthians. It didn't matter. And, in fact, to this day, there are exhaustive opinion pieces in political journals and academic treatises all over. As the left and these wizards of smart and all of these academics are going nuts trying to explain to themselves how these people could have supported Trump. Do you know when he went to the prayer breakfast, he actually said the word hell? They don't know why Trump wasn't kicked out. They don't understand why Trump wasn't kicked out, because it is they who have a bigoted, caricatured impersonation of religious people, and particularly Christians. When it comes to Muslims, well, they're the epitome of modernity, the epitome of advanced civilization. Understand them backwards and forwards, inside out, upside down. When it comes to Christians, they're the biggest unknown potential enemy under the sun. Let me tell you a little story. Way, way back in the early days of this program, I was invited to MC the annual dinner for the Council on National Policy. Now, I didn't even know what it was when I was invited. It turns out the Council on National Policy is a conservative attempt at putting together a counterpart to the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. And I didn't do enough research to understand exactly who was in this group. I thought they were all conservatives, and so I thought that permitted certain things. So at the time, there was a story that I was using in my appearances that was fairly recent, and it had the added benefit of being true. And remember, this is early on. They've all heard of me, but they still don't know much about me and where I've come from, because I'm not a networker. I literally, as far as these people in Washington, I came out of nowhere. I mean, there was nothing. You know, there's a guy in Sacramento, and he's really kicking it. There was none of that. I mean, it's like I didn't exist until August 1st, 1988. So I'm opening the event, telling everybody how happy I am to be there. They're applauding. It's a wonderful night. I've got Paul Weyrich had invited me. Bill Bennett is there. So I tell this story about Ted Kennedy in a speedboat off the coast of the south of France with a scantily clad young woman, less than half his age. And I said, we know that this is true because there were paparazzi helicopters flying around taking photos, still photos. And I said there were 3 photos. In the first photo, Senator Kennedy and the young woman in a state of embrace. in the boat. It was a speedboat. It was not a yacht speedboat. You could see, in other words. And in the next photo, the woman is in the water, and Senator Kennedy is jumping off the side to go in and join her in the water. And I said, we've never seen this. We have never seen Senator Kennedy dive into a body of water for a woman. I said, this is a first. Moderate chuckles. I was starting to get, that should have brought the house down, but it didn't. And then the third picture showed Senator Kennedy and this nubile young thing in various stages of intimacy in the boat. And I said these pictures began to be passed around Washington. And they eventually reached Senator Howell Heflin of Alabama. He was a big old guy, and he had a big, powerful, lumbering voice with a Southern accent. And they showed the pictures of Senator Kennedy to Howell Heflin. And he looked at the picture. He said, well, I do declare. It looked to me like Senator Kennedy had done changed his position on offshore drilling. And there wasn't a sound in the room. Not a sound. And I thought, how does this not work in a room full of conservatives? How does this not work? So that happened to be the last story before dinner, so it was a natural exit from the podium to get back to my table. And when I walked back to the table, I was being stared daggers. And when I got to my table, a couple people said, you should have cleared that with us. I said, would you tell me what happened? Because actually, folks, half the room, half the room, the truth is half the room laughed. The other half of the room was where there was no reaction. He said, didn't anybody tell you that half of this club is religious leaders on the right? I said, oh, no, you're kidding. No, nobody told me that. I said, I wonder what James Dobson was doing here. He was in the audience, and he had with him Donna Rice. And I remember they said, when it comes time for you to get back up there, you need to apologize. You need to apologize, because that didn't work with this crowd. Okay, so I went up there and I apologized. Everything ended up okay. So I'm walking out at the end of the evening. I'm walking through the crowd, and everybody's, either having dessert or whatever, getting ready to leave. And I saw James Dobson, Dr. Dobson, and it looked like it was Donna Rice. And what in the world? I mean, I just caught hell. And here's Donna Rice. It was caught actually on a boat with Gary Hart. I said, what's not right about this picture? So I walked up and introduced myself. I said, Dr. Dobson, I'm Rush Limbaugh. That looked like Donna Rice? Yes, it was. She has found the Lord. She's found God. Something you might want to look into. Oh, geez. It still wasn't over. Anyway, I'm convinced that I have softened that crowd up now to where Trump can go do what he did. Ask him to pray for Schwarzenegger. I've never forgotten it. Everything ended up fine. It was one of those learning experiences. Everybody that was there still laughs about it when it's brought up. Anyway, I must take a brief time. It's Open Line Friday. Your calls continue after this. Don't go away. Now, just to be thorough on this, we had a caller ask me if I thought that Trump could have been ragging on Schwarzenegger to get the ratings of the show up. And I answered the guy acknowledging his idea because I'm a polite host. But I don't think there's anything to it. I think Trump was being who Trump is. I think Trump, he just can't help himself. The guy replacing him on that show is not doing as well, and he wants to point it out. He was a joking, funny, light-hearted thing at the prayer breakfast. And the key to it to me is when he asked them to pray for Arnold's ratings. So I don't think there's anything more to it. I don't think there's a conspiracy. I don't think there's any conspiracies with Trump. I think one of the problems people have with Trump is he is who he is. And most everybody else in politics is trying to hide who they really are. And from the moment they've wanted to go into politics, they hide who they are. I mean, they understand certain things about their lives are going to have to make public, like their tax returns and like their financial statements. So they arrange all that stuff for public disclosure in a way that doesn't hurt them. Trump never thought he was ever going to do this, and so aspects of his life that he's lived, he's never, ever intended or thought they would be made public. And in that sense, I think something like Trump is refreshing, and I think it's one of the reasons, one of the many, why people elected Trump. They're simply fed up with the way Washington is working, and the instability is brought to us by the people who, you ought to see the latest cover of the Village Voice. I already described for you the cover of Der Spiegel. The Village Voice has a cover. It's a color photo of Donald Trump through sniper crosshairs with the crosshairs at his temple. And the headline is, "Why not?" So the Village Voice has a cover advocating the assassination of the President of the United States. Der Spiegel in Germany has a cover of Trump having decapitated the Statue of Liberty and is holding it in his right hand with a knife he used to decapitate it in his left hand. The statue is bleeding. Peggy Noonan, the headline to her column, "Trump's Washington, nothing seems stable, nothing feels stable." It's not Trump's Washington. Now, you remember when Gabby Giffords was shot in Arizona, and they tried to blame it on Sarah Palin, because on Sarah Palin's website, she had some graphic image of crosshairs at something or other. They tried to really say that the wacko that shot Gabby Giffords was inspired by Sarah Palin. Now, here, everything that they've ever held up as a standard not to be done, as impolitic and as promoting violence, they are doing. You can't have something more crystal clear than this Village Voice cover. You can see it on Drudge. We'll link to it at rushlimbaugh.com. Meantime, Edmund in Lexington, Illinois. Great to have you, sir. How are you doing?
Rush. That Robert Reich, he violated 3 rules that I know of when you report on a riot. Number 1 rule is you don't say your students weren't there because you don't know, because they were all wearing a mask. That's number 1. This is becoming fake news. Number 2, Rush, he made outrageous claim, which people like you and Donald Trump would call braggadocio or something like that. He must know all 38,000 students at that university.
I was going to say he was able. He knew the students. He knows the students at Berkeley, and then that's not who he saw. He did really know 40,000 students at Berkeley. It was absurd.
He knows them. He knows them, and even if they're wearing a mask.
Right.
Rush, the 3rd law that he violated was, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but somebody who's 4'8" can't see what the hell's going on in a riot. Those are the 3 rules that I think are violated, and they're very important.
I'm glad you called there, Edmund. Ladies and gentlemen, what he's referring to, we had a couple sound bites in the first hour of the program. It's how long poor Edmund's been on hold here. It's one of the dangers when people start talking about things that happened hours ago. You may not know what he's talking about. I have to set the table for you. Robert Reich, 2 sound bites, claimed that he was at Berkeley, and these weren't students. He knows the students at Berkeley, and it is not who they were. These were Breitbart right-wingers that were hired to blow up Berkeley. And so Edmund is offering here his 3 different laws that Reich violated in making these claims. And his 3rd one is, not to be disrespectful, but Labor Secretary Reich is 4.8. 4 foot, 8 inches. And Edmund was making the point that when you're 4'8", you can't see what's going on in a riot. And if you think that's making fun of Labor Secretary Reich, you should know that Bill Clinton was the first to do it, standing next to a giant dollhouse at a Christmas display. And Clinton said, "Hey, you know what? Labor Secretary Reich could live in that little thing, don't you know?" One big exciting broadcast hour remains on Open Line Friday. And we'll be up to it sooner than you believe. Right back at you, folks. Hang in there. And don't go away. So you know that Fox News hired Marie Harf. Yeah, she's on there right now. They hired her as an analyst. She was a spokeswoman that kept being demoted at the Obama State Department. Now she's a full-fledged Fox analyst. I just saw a little bit of her analysis of what we're doing vis-a-vis Iran. And she's so concerned. It's such an area of the world that's in crisis. And I really don't think that we should be conducting diplomacy by tweet.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
It's another one of these things. Trying to keep up with all this that's happening. And it can be done, but you don't get to spend much time on anything if you want to cover it all. Greetings. Welcome back. Open Line Friday. Rush Limbaugh behind the golden EIB microphone. She also just said something that I was unaware of. She said that she was very heartened to see that President Trump admitted that Iran launching these missiles is not a violation of the nuclear deal. I was very heartened to see that President Trump said it's not a violation of the nuclear deal, because it's her nuclear deal. I mean, she was there at the State Department. And these sanctions, President Trump has put exactly the same sanctions that we had. So I guess it must be okay then. But this is the first I've heard. Again, it's not possible to keep up with everything. The first I've heard that the Trump people have admitted this was not a violation of the nuke deal. If it wasn't a violation of the nuclear deal, then the sanctions exist simply because they fired the missiles. And we do have a destroyer that's off the coast of Yemen. I mean, we're ramping up. We are prepping to implement these sanctions. And there's no question it's an area of the world that's in deep crisis. But for crying out loud, to have somebody on who was from an administration that just gunked everything up by hanging around and basically drawing all these meaningless red lines in the sand on Syria and Russia and huffing and puffing and then not doing anything and letting it be known that we would never do anything and we're just being roughshod, run over by whoever it is, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. And now one of the principal spokespeople for that policy is up passing judgment here on what's going on. You know, folks, are you familiar with this raid that happened, this raid on Al-Qaeda? There are a number of learned people who are of the opinion, this is where the Navy SEAL died in this commando raid, and it was on the Arabian Peninsula. And there are people who think that the Pentagon is trying to sabotage and undermine Trump. Remember this? Obama people left all over this bureaucracy, folks, including in the Pentagon. Do not make the mistake that the Pentagon is made up of people who want to kick ass. You've got a lot of politically correct types in every Washington bureaucracy. You have warrior generals, you have the PC generals, you have the generals who want to climb the ladder success after success on the battlefield and real victories, and you have others that don't ever want to see battle, don't ever want to be in charge of battle. This operation was put in place during the Obama presidency, and like all military operations, the president does not draw these up. The president gives the go sign, the go order, but the president is not the military commander. The military commander on the ground or in the Pentagon, wherever the planning takes place, they devise the strategies. Trump is not a military commando leader, and there hasn't been one of those since Eisenhower. Do you realize there has not been a president in the United States since Eisenhower who was qualified to actually plan commando raids like this? And they're now trying to dump this off on Trump. The Pentagon has people trying to dump this off on Trump, that Trump's ineptitude and his incompetence is behind this raid that went bad. And that's not what happened at all. This raid was drawn up, and the details for it during the Obama administration. And the commandos on the ground, the commando leader wanted to go, and then decided to wait because they needed a moonless night. So they needed a full moon, a new moon, rather. And there wasn't going to be a new moon before Obama left office, after the final plan was put to bed and decided it was operational. They needed a new moon, and the first new moon came after Trump was inaugurated. So Trump's brought up to speed, and his team are shown the details of the plan, and he signs off on it. And during the raid, it was learned that their cover had been blown. During the raid, it was learned that the house, the building that they were to hit, inside this building was a treasure trove of intel possibilities, cell phones, laptop computers, any number of things that, had we been able to get, it would have provided a treasure trove of intelligence data on Al-Qaeda. And the commandos in the middle of the operation figured out early on that they were known. It was known by the enemy they were coming. They did not have stealth. They did not have the element of surprise. Now, nobody's pointing fingers yet as to how this happened. Right now, they're chalking it up to the fact that the targets on the ground were able to hear the drones flying over, and were able to hear other military aircraft that were not flying high enough to disguise their sound. And if, by the way, if you're a militant Islamist in the Middle East, you know the sound of an American drone. And if you can hear it, you know what it is. Normally they fly high enough that you're not able to hear them. And something new happened in this operation they hadn't seen before. Young girls and women had taken up arms and were firing back. It was SEAL Team 6, the same team that killed bin Laden, that was assigned the task of this raid. It was in Yemen, in the Arabian Peninsula. And all kinds of things went wrong. You haven't heard much about this other than the fact that Trump went to Dover to greet the coffin of the SEAL Team 6 member that came back who had died in the attack. But in the upper echelons, there are leaks and all kinds of other stories blaming Trump. Typical doesn't know what he's doing, typical cowboy Trump. And none of it's true. Not a single word of it is true. Presidents do not. The last president that tried to engage in actual mission command was LBJ picking. Oh, I'm sorry. It was Obama. Obama picking drone targets and LBJ picking targets in Vietnam, bombing targets. But this is not on Trump, what happened. And it would not have been on Obama. Things like this, presidents understandably are going to get the success or the blame when things like this happen. But this mission should have been called off the minute they found out they were compromised. The minute they found out that the targets knew we were headed for them, they should have pulled the plug and gone the other way. But the reason for this story is that now we're doing sanctions on Iran, and the people at the State Department still, people at the Pentagon, there are all kinds of people still want to undermine Trump and engage in policy that will be shown as Trump failure. We still find ourselves at a very dangerous time. It is a profoundly dangerous time because there are people with so much irrational hatred and opposition to Donald Trump that I don't think they would blink at something that did real damage to America if it helped take out Trump. I think it's a price they would be willing to. I think they're so off their rockers now and unhinged and deranged. By the way, I need to correct something. It's not the Village Voice. It's a magazine from Ireland called The Village Magazine. the magazine that has the close-up on Trump's head with a sniper, crosshairs aimed right at his left temple with the headline, "Why Not?" I mistakenly referred to that as a Village Voice cover. It's not. It's an Ireland magazine, and it's called the Village magazine. So anyway, it's really, really fraught with potential danger for the president and for everybody else. Now, what did I have? I just had it here. Investors Business Daily has just published this. Remember those airport protests after the Trump executive order? I don't need Investors Business Daily because I already theorized this. Those protests were just sitting around waiting to go for an event. When the Trump executive order on vetting and so-called the Muslim ban, which it wasn't, when it was put into place on Friday, remember all those protests at the airports at JFK and LAX, and it was made to look like exactly what the left does in cooperation with the media, that a whole bunch of people minding their own business just outraged at what Trump did, and they left their homes and they joined the protest march out of principle. They're so opposed to Trump, so opposed to Trump's policy. And in fact, it wasn't the case at all. They were bought and paid for protesters sitting around waiting for go orders, waiting for any event to get off the couch, leave the house, and go out and officially protest. Investors Business Daily has found the proof, has found the evidence. As I say, I didn't need any. I know the left. I knew these protests were not organic. I knew they were not generic. I knew they didn't just spring out of the earth. They were bought, they were paid for, they were organized, the signs were handmade and printed and so forth, and they were just waiting for the first thing Trump did that they thought would justify that kind of response. The point is that much of this opposition to Trump that you're seeing is fake. Like fake news, it's fake protests, in the sense that if it hadn't been planned, and if it hadn't been the subject of a goal order, and if people weren't being paid, it wouldn't be happening. Same thing in Berkeley. Every bit of that, staged, planned, and probably even choreographed, including whether or not the police were going to put up much of a fight. Only one arrest. But this is what the left does, folks. Everything they do is fake. Everything is made to look natural and organic, and like the anger and emotion is legitimate and directly tied to irrational behavior of Donald Trump or any other conservative Republican. In fact, it's none of those things. It is entirely fake. And the help provided by the media, making it look real, is the icing on the cake. I have to take a break. We'll come back and resume with your phone calls after this. There's the president on the way to Air Force One at Joint Base Andrews. He's on his way here. By the way, I got the new flight restrictions for EIB-1 when the president is here. And it's not bad, and there are ways around it. Basically, you got to leave between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., and you have to leave from one spot, and you have to submit to all kinds of... But you can avoid it by going to the airport. Anyway, it's not nearly as restrictive as people had led us to believe. So if he's leaving now, Washington, he'll touch down here, if they get wheels up in half an hour. So he'll be done easily by 4:30, 5 o'clock. Right down the road at Mar-a-Lago. In fact, you better get right out of here at 3 o'clock. So whatever route you take to go home by the airport, you want to skedaddle El Quico. You don't need to hang around to hear the update, because they might put all kinds of detours around the airport. You might have to drive down to Boca to get to Wellington. You don't want to have to do that, right? John in Barrington, Illinois. Great to have you on Open Line Friday, sir. How are you?
Nice transition, Rush. Thank you. And thank you for taking my call.
Yeah.
If I may say real quick before I get to my point, Oprah got tons of credit when she got her sponsors to give the audience cars and all kinds of stuff, and I don't think you've gotten nearly enough credit for your generosity over the past couple months with your listeners without sponsor involvement. So
Well, I never will, but that's not why I do it anyway. But if I were liberal, if I were liberal, if I hosted the Daily Show and had done that, do you realize there'd have been pieces and profiles and accolades for weeks all over the media about it?
Yep.
I never even heard from Apple. But that's just the price to pay for not being a good lib.
Not surprising. Anyway, my thought was, I've been encountering a lot of there's a lot of racist things being tossed around to just people who are supporting Trump. And my thought was, do you think if Donald Trump would maybe have an ongoing and active outreach to the minority communities, he could permanently split the Democratic Party if it were meaningful and it got us to move more toward a colorblind society rather than a racially divisive society?
Well, a colorblind society is a tough thing to predict because so many in the racial community do not want there to ever be one. And I'm talking about people like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. They do not want an end to racism. They'd be out of business. They do not want an end. They do not want the opportunity to point to racism and demand money or to shake down companies. They don't want any of that to end. So the very people who profit from it are the last ones who want it to end. However, I love your question because Trump is already off and running with outreach to the African-American community. He had a big meeting at the White House yesterday to kick off African-American History Month. But he did it with an entirely different group of African-American leaders. Every one of them was a conservative. Leaders that otherwise you wouldn't know exist. But, John, the real answer to your question, the Democrat Party's already in huge trouble. The Democrat Party is being defeated profoundly, election after election. In 2018, it's going to happen again. They are in deep trouble. You just don't know it because of the media and the way they present these protests and so forth. But they are in dire straits right now. I am not exaggerating. Look, I'm also not naive. I understand that in many aspects of life, the perception is reality, and I realize that's what we're up against. But I'm also the mayor of Realville. I am a devoted literalist. It leads to many communication problems, by the way, that I have with some people. But I persevere, and I try to bring them around to more clear expression of what they mean so that I don't have to try to translate things. And I say this to once again remind you, let's this Investor's Business Daily report, this is something that I already knew because I know liberalism. I didn't know the specifics of this, but I knew that those airport protests after the Trump executive order limiting immigration or whatever you want to call it, I knew they weren't real. I knew they weren't spontaneous. They could not have been. That's not real. Things do not happen that way. They had to be planned. They had to be orchestrated. There had to be people waiting for a go order. You just can't have that many tens of thousands of people showing up all over the country over a single executive order. But the perception was that it was organic. The perception was that it was totally spontaneous. And then the conclusion was, man, this country hates Trump. Oh, man, the majority of this people in this country hate Trump. Oh, man, it was designed to make those of you who voted for him think something went wrong. IBD has learned the protests weren't spontaneous at all. They were the result of months of careful planning by hardcore left-wing activist groups who had listened to Trump say he was going to issue an executive order like this shortly after being inaugurated, and they were sitting around waiting for it to happen. It's all in the Daily Beast, it turns out. the organizers and the people who had set this up, professional organizers, have been waiting and planning this type of mass direct action ready-made to go viral on social media ever since November 9th, ever since Election Day. These are professional organizers. They're bought and paid for by various Democrats led by George Soros, the Hillary Clinton campaign, Clinton Foundation. They have been anticipating and mapping out their battle plans for Trump's executive orders on deportations, on bans, on detention. The executive director of the Arab American Action Network told the Daily Beast that we had been laying the groundwork for this for a long, long time, since Trump had made clear that he planned, actually on day one, to issue a temporary ban on visas and refugees from terror-prone countries. All these groups had to do was wait until he actually made good on the order, and they sprung into action. Now, the truth of the matter, the truth of American politics today, and I'm sorry if this is redundant, but it needs to be repeated because it's the only way to fight back against these false perceptions being created by the media. The Democrat Party is losing, and losing big. The Democrat Party has not had this few seats in Washington since the 1920s, ladies and gentlemen. The Democrat Party has lost over 1,200 seats, federal, state, and local level, since the midterm elections of 2010. There are only 5 states where the Democrats have the governorship and the control of the state legislature. Actually, it's only 4, because in one of the states there's a tie and they have the tiebreaker. So it's, in real numbers, it's only 4. In 2018, they have 10 senators up for re-election in states that Trump won, in most part, by double digits. Trump has not been stopped from doing anything he's intended to do. He is implementing any number of things. He's issuing executive orders. He's not been deterred. He's not been stopped, and it irritates him all to hell. Just today, there was an executive action signed about Dodd-Frank. Now, before you get all excited, these are the kind of things that you need to temper. What was signed today was not getting rid of it. What they signed today was an executive action or an order to do a review of it, which is the first step to getting rid of it. You can't just come in and strike it. I mean, I would, but there apparently is a process that you have to go through to examine it and show where it's failing and what its problems are before you can get rid of it. And if you're going to have a review, then there's always a danger that Obama holdovers are going to end up being part of the review. I mean, these people have corrupted everything, and they still remain in positions of invisible power throughout the bureaucracy. But the picture being created for you multiple times a day in the media is that Trump's victory is an aberration, a mistake, maybe a fraud, maybe a crime. And it's obscene because it doesn't represent the majority of thinking in the country, when it in fact does. The Democrats lost the election. They are losing seats left and right. Only 25% of the people in this country openly identify as liberal. 37% openly identify as conservative. The big factor here, as it always is the media. The media knows that it is helping to spread lies, such as the spontaneous nature of the airport protests after the Trump executive order on deportation, immigration, whatever you want to call it. And at Berkeley, when Yiannopoulos was supposed to speak, and apparently the vast majority of people wanted no part of the Breitbart editor, no part whatsoever. But planned, paid for, organized. Even I saw today the police ordered to stand down for a while in order to let the protest reach its full maximum strength. Peggy Noonan's headline today in her column, Trump's Washington feels unstable. It's not Trump's Washington yet. Folks, whenever you engage to turn upside down an entire political structure that has existed and basically embedded itself with tentacles woven deep throughout the fabric of his existence for decades, it is going to look bloody. It is going to look ugly. And there is not, in what we call the mainstream media, there is not a fair representation or reporting of what is happening. I know it is very hard to be confident when you don't see evidence of what I'm telling you. I mean, you can see how the Democrats have lost seats. I mean, you can see their numbers. They're in the minority in the House, they're in the minority in the Senate, minority of governorships. But you don't see them acting that way, and you don't see the media treating them that way. You see exact opposite. It's designed to dispirit you. It's designed to depress you. It's designed to make you think you're never really going to succeed at this. It's designed to make you think that they're going to be able to get rid of Trump next week, next month. It's designed to make you think they're going to make Trump cave. It's designed to make you think they're going to tick Trump off so much, they're going to make even Trump think it can't be done. He's going to throw his hands up and say, "What, Pence? You can have it. I'm leaving." Whatever they have to do to make you think this is a lost cause, they will do, and they are doing. And it's going to continue. And Trump is not going to slow down, and he's not going to pull back. He's got people around him who are not going to slow down and who are not going to pull back. He and the people he has around him are hell-bent on defeating these people and getting them out of the way. It's going to look very bad. It's going to make you feel very uncomfortable as it continues to happen. And you're going to be lied to left and right with fake news and fake protests and fake this and fake that. And they're going to undertake efforts to make everybody in the Trump team look like they are criminals, like they are racist bigots, like they hate people, or what have you. It's going to intensify, but Trump's going to be outrunning them. They aren't going to be able to keep up with his pace. They still haven't realized what's hit them, I don't think. They're going to make up polls, approval polls. They're going to try to tell you Trump's the most unpopular president after 3 weeks that we've ever had in America. They're going to try to make you think that everybody voted for Trump is abandoning him, except you. They want you to think you're alone. They want you to think that your associates and like-minded voters have all abandoned you, and you're the only guy still pulling for Trump. You're the only person out there still hoping and praying this all happens. They want to bust up the coalition. It is vicious. This is exactly what it has always been going to look like. We take a break. I want to offer just a couple of little thoughts on the Super Bowl. As I said yesterday, I'm the least involved in this one than any I can remember, but I'm still going to give it some lip service. Okay, Super Bowl, quickly. Two ways to look at this game. You've got the X's and O's, strategery, on-field strategy. Bill Belichick tries to take away the opposing team's strength and make the opposing team beat him with other people. That would be taking away Julio Jones, wide receiver for the Falcons. You go through all of that, and then you come down to what you think the game's going to be. Best quarterback, who's going to have the best. I don't think that's the way to look at this. I think you have to look at the intangibles in this game. And I think the biggest intangible is the motivation of Tom Brady. There's a lot on the line for Tom Brady. He can become the first and only quarterback to win 5 Super Bowls. He can get rid of that Deflategate monkey on his back. His mother is ill, and it took pretty much everything she had to get to this game. This is going to be the first game of the season she's been to. He's very centered guy in this regard. The entire Patriots team is similarly motivated on the Deflategate stuff, with the commissioner of the NFL being the Antichrist. And when you have that kind of motivation, when you have that kind of energy, when you have that kind of purpose and commitment, it takes a monumental effort to match it. You've watched games and you've seen the momentum shift, and you wonder why. I mean, teams come out of the gate looking like well-oiled machines, and they're just going fast. In the middle of second quarter, the game takes a total change. Nobody can understand the momentum shift changes. If a coach could, they'd never be out of a job. But it's those kind of things that I think are going to determine this game. The Falcons can beat the Patriots. There's no question in my mind. And the Falcons' skill position players can stick with the Patriots' skill position players all day. And then there's the intangible of injuries in the game. You just don't know. But I think the motivational aspect, you might, Rush, they're pros. They don't need any more motivation. That's where everybody's wrong. Human beings are human beings, and there are things that get your adrenaline going even more than certain things do. Mark my words. I think it's going to be a rout. Either way, it's going to be a rout. And also this, secretive anti-Trump protests to erupt Super Bowl weekend in Houston. Keep a sharp eye. They're going to be portrayed as organic and natural. Lady Gaga's practically telegraphing her halftime show as anti-Trump. The NFL has hired the cast of Hamilton to sing America the Beautiful, or probably put Trump in the lyrics. If you're a Trump supporter, you're probably going to get pretty ticked off at stages watching this game. We'll see if I end up being right about how much of this. No, not predicting a winner. But I'm telling you, if things... Well, I guess I am. I'm saying the Patriots are going to win if... all things being equal, I just think the things motivating them are things the Falcons can't even approach for motivation, other than beating the Patriots. We'll see. Anyway, we'll have whatever I said reviewed on Monday. Look forward to then, folks. See you then.